At a glance, this just looks like a picture of some women and their children. Well, those are not kids. Those are dolls. And they're creepy dolls. Now, were they creepy at the time they had the dolls? Probably not. That's just what they're used to. But by today's standards, these are the haunted dolls. So this would probably be like a great postcard for someone, even just for a Halloween display or whatever. It's just a really
if you got a dollar, won't just lousy down. You know that I got rhythm that could suit your...
Hey, this is Patrick with Trusty Huckster Mercantile. Welcome to my channel, and welcome to what I hope will be a return to, we'll see, the Trusty's Vintage Deep Dives. I did several of them, and if you go into the playlists on my channel, you will find a series of Trusty's Vintage Deep Dives, and then you'll find some duo dives, which I did with Katie from Vintage and Vinyl, and then you'll find some triptychs, which Katie and I did with Nate from Soul Nate, and they're all just a series of videos kind of doing a dive into researching certain topics. And recently I did a video where I showed some postcards that I picked up at a garage sale. And as I was doing some digging into just kind of figuring out how old they were, what exactly I had, it kind of triggered the idea that I do another deep dive. I'm not going to go like super in depth, but I wanted to cover the general topic and go into a little bit of history about real photo postcards. So what I found at the estate sale was a series of real photo postcards. And so we'll start with some of the ones that I found. You know, all of these have images on the front, and on the back there is a postcard, or, you know, it indicates that it's a postcard. So a lot of these are images of families, some individuals, some groups. We've got men, we've got women, we've got kids. We've got two men together, another one, two men together. So it's a mix. And admittedly, when I got them at the garage sale, I did ask, you know, what if they knew anything about them, and they said really they did not. They had found them in a bag in a desk, and they really had no indication of whether they were even family members. And looking at some of the individual photographs, some of them do look like they might be the same person in more than one photo. But are they family? Are they related to the people I got them from? Who knows? So I picked them up in Illinois, but there's no indication or no guarantee that these are even Illinois families. So the downside with these postcards specifically is you can see some of them have been posted into scrapbook. So they've got the nasty, you know, stuff on the back, but you can still sell their postcards. But there's no history. They were not mailed. There's no postmark, so you really can't even tell where they came from. I do have, one of them's a duplicate. So there was a case, I think it was this one. So there was a case where there was more than one of these. So they probably got this photograph taken and then turned them into sets of postcards and maybe mailed off some, and then for whatever reason had a couple left over that they never mailed. So doing a little bit of digging into just what a real photo postcard is. They were invented in 1907 by, no huge surprise, Kodak. And the idea behind a real photo postcard is that you would take an image that was developed as a photograph and print it onto an actual card that became the postcard. Now, doing a little bit of digging, it sounds like in the beginning, they were fairly flimsy. They were fairly lightweight, so they did not travel well through the mailing system. And so then after a little bit of time, they actually did do thicker paper. All of these are pretty much about the same weight, and I'm going to showcase, and this is why it's turning into a deep dive, I'm going to showcase some of the ways that you can use to actually determine the age of a real photo postcard, even if you don't have a postmark or anything on there that indicates when it was made or when the photograph was taken. But in comparison, I do have, and it's hard to tell this from images, but if you were holding these, this photograph, a real photo postcard, is from World War II era. These are from prior World War I. So I can tell that this is a little bit lighter weight than this, but to be perfectly honest, if I had just held these independently, I don't think I necessarily would have noticed. So just sharing that as a general, it's nice to find rules of thumb But this whole idea is that they became thicker or heavier over time. That might be true, but it's not necessarily going to be the easiest way for you to tell. So how can you tell if you have a Real Photo postcard? All right, well, we know that they were started in 1907. There is a history of postcards that predate that. So in early days, postcards were not actually called postcards. They were called private mailing cards. And I did a little bit of digging into my eBay store. And the oldest one that I found is this one. And it does not say private mailing card, unfortunately. This one does call it a postal card as opposed to a postcard. But there's less mystery on this one because it says right on here, one, you can see the postmark of when it was mailed, so it was 1899. But this also happens to be, there's a Huckster card, which is why I had picked this up and offering it for resale. It also has the date that the original card was written. So this was written on June 24th, 1899. Just a little rabbit hole here. So this was a card that was sent to a store that basically said, our Mr. C.H. Gay will call upon you on Tuesday, June 27th, or maybe this is 28th, asking you to reserve your orders for him. We remain very respectfully the Marshfield Bedding Company. So since, in 1899, there would have been telephones, maybe not everyone had one. It was difficult to make appointments. You would actually mail a postcard to say, hey, I'm going to be in town and I want to visit you on this day. Now, there's no way for you to say no. And what I actually find interesting, again, a little bit of a rabbit hole, but what I find interesting on this one is that the card itself is dated the 24th. It wasn't postmarked until the 26th. It says right on there. So it took 2 days for them to mail it. And if that indeed says the 27th, they probably received the same day the person was going to arrive. So I don't know how good this was. But anyway, I find this very cool. But anyway, the reason I wanted to show this is because earlier postcards, even once they became postcards, were very specifically designed that you had... the address had to stay on one side. So the entire side of the postcard would be on one side. And then the opposite side would typically be the photograph, the illustration, or in this case, it's the, actual messaging. But the original postcards, and I do have a couple other examples of that, original postcards, they just were not designed. This one is from 1905. Now this is actually kind of cool. You can see that there's, this is an embossed postcard, but you can see this side has the address on it. The message was a little place here off to the side, squeezed in where the image was. So you had to write your message on the same side as the image because the entire back side needed to be for the address. Now, this is 1905. Shortly after that, they did introduce the concept of divided postcards. So this one's 1911. So this one, you have a more traditional postcard. You've got the image on the back. And then on the opposite side, you have a place on one side for the address. This one happens to have a dividing line. And then the other side, you've got the actual place for the message, which I find interesting was written on the side. So it's not even written in the same direction as the address. So there are some changes on that one. And then there's also things like this one, the other Real Photo Postcard I showed you. I'll come back to this. But this is also an indication of a divided postcard that even though there's not a vertical line, you can see there's a place for address on the side and then opposite place for correspondence. So sometimes you can date postcards just based on whether they have a divided back because that it was a, lack of a better term, legal thing that if you didn't have a place to write your message on the same side as the address, it makes them earlier cards. But again, going back to the whole batch of photo postcards that I picked up, in these particular cases, these are all, the idea of a photo postcard didn't exist until 1907. So these have to be dated after that. And then, okay, what else can you use to be able to do more research? You can see this. So here in the upper right-hand corner, where you would put the stamp, there is some writing. And so you've got AZO, and there's this place stamp here. And if you look really carefully, there are also triangles in the four corners of that little postage stamp space. And the difference helps indicate the age. Well, actually, I'm going to jump into something else first. So this one, same stack, looks more like a traditional photograph, has postcard. But if you look on the back, this one is something different. So this one has CYTO, I think, or CYTK on the back where that image is. The internet is a fantastic place, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time, going into like all the different options, because you can find this online. I did a Google search for that image. Took me straight to a page that indicated what the year was of when this one was made. So this one is actually one of the earliest ones. But what's nice about these AZO ones is AZO is actually the paper that was made by Kodak. So Kodak invented the Real Photo Postcard. They have a way of dating their own. Paper. So this one shows you 4 triangles, and they're all pointing up. But this one of this individual, this one still has the AZO, so it's still the same paper. But if you look, the top 2 triangles are pointing up, and the bottom 2 triangles are pointing down. That is then a different age. And so again, I will indicate the website so you can find it yourself. A Google search is fairly easy to find that. But there's all different types of paper, all different types of indications like that, so you can help indicate the age. But what I skipped over, what I skipped over is, well, how do I know I even have a Real Photo Postcard? So that tip can be used for any postcard. If you have that the CY thing on the back, you can still figure out, all right, whose paper was that? When was that made? Might indicate it's a Real Photo Postcard. It might not, but it's still going to indicate the age that was given. The AZO does indicate that would only have been on the back of photo postcards. So that kind of helps indicate. But if you're not sure what a Real Photo Postcard is, and this is another example. So going back to this one I'd shown, not a huge surprise. This one is from World War II. You go on the back of this one, you can see that different image is on the back. You search that image and it dates it into World War II. But if you're not sure, like, well, how do I even know that I've got a Real Photo Postcard? Part of the deep dive is to be able to figure out how to do that. So the biggest thing that's a difference in how a photo postcard is made versus how a regular printed postcard is made is actually the printing process. If you think about, developing, even if you don't understand, and I can't pretend that I do, but if you think about how negatives, anything you've seen in movies, any of the types of stuff of how photographs are made, you're dealing with chemicals that are dealing with exposures, and it's all kind of like creating a uniform vision, and then it's impressing itself upon the paper that receives that photographic plate. So what ends up happening is, when you get a photograph, if you look under magnification, it looks like it's a fully printed, it looks solid. So if you look at the black, it looks black. If you look at the gray, they look gray. If you happen to have color, it's much later, but if you happen to have color, it's a solid color. The difference, and you can easily tell this from something like a newspaper, or I found this as an example, when you've got like old illustrations, you start looking at something like this, and you can see it at a glance. Well, clearly this is not a photograph. Well, if you look under magnification, like even if okay, but I still want to be able to compare it. If you take this illustration and put it under simple magnification, so just grab your phone. My phone goes up to 5x. I think a lot of phones do. Some might go beyond that. But even just using 5x, you will be able to see, and I will superimpose an image from the bottom corner of this one. You will see that this has dots that are making up that color. So if at any point you take a postcard or a photographic postcard, even under 5x, a Real Photo Postcard, you're not going to see the dots, but I'm going to talk about that in a second. But in a poorly printed or in a generally printed postcard, you will see it. And I grabbed a much later photo postcard, or I'm sorry, it is a photograph. I took a much later postcard, and I think this one's from like the 60s or something like that, 50s or 60s, of Greyhound bus. Looks like a photograph to me. So does this mean it is a real photo postcard? No, because even at 5x, when you start zooming in on some parts of the bus, you can see that the color is being made by dots. Now, sometimes when you get into much later or really well done, it's not as easy to see. So I'm going to use this one as a comparison. I also have, now this is a free app. You can download it for free onto your phone. There are magnifiers that you can go up to 30x. So if you take the same photograph, zoom under 30x, you will see much more clearly, oh wow, there are dots. When you do that on a real photo postcard, you will not see those dots. So that is like the cleanest way to be able to tell. And sometimes the 5x is really nice because then if you're at an estate sale, you're at an antique shop and you're just kind of like, oh, I'm curious, this is a real photo postcard. The 5x is nice because it can just be on your phone. Where it becomes a little bit different is when you're dealing with much more contemporary printing. So this is a postcard that I just received in the mail recently and I'm holding it upside down, for a gala coming up from a museum that I'm a member. If you look at it, there is an image on the back of this. Well, if you look at it under 5x, looks pretty solid. But when you magnify it to 30x, you again will end up seeing that there are dots that are making up the color of that pink that's in the background. So that is probably, I don't hate to say definitive, but that's really kind of the way you're going to know if you have a real photo postcard, whether it's more recent or older. If you got if you have a real photo postcard, it doesn't matter how heavy the magnification is, you will not see the dots making up the printing because it's part of the actual printing. Now, I remember in the 80s and 90s, when our daughter was born in 1999, so maybe even going into 2000s, there was a whole idea that you could get photographs printed and then you could apply them to postcards. That's not what we're talking about. This is actually the photo has been turned into a postcard. So just kind of keeping a difference on that. So that is the definition of a real photo postcard and how you're able to do a little bit of aging. Why do you care? Well, maybe you don't. Hopefully this is just kind of a little short video that kind of gives you a little bit of things to think about. But where it does become, if you are a reseller, a real photo postcard, which is abbreviated RPPC, is a collectible category in and of itself in eBay. And if you look at the historical sales records of real photo postcards, they will always do, well, always, okay, air quotes, but they will typically do better than other generic postcards because there are people that just collect them. So you end up having people that will collect, like this ends up being, I showed it at a glance. If you look really carefully, and I'll try and superimpose some photos on this, at a glance, this just looks like a picture of some women and their children. Well, those are not kids. Those are dolls. And they're creepy dolls. Now, were they creepy at the time they had the dolls? Probably not. That's just what they're used to. But by today's standards, these are the haunted dolls. So this would probably be like a great postcard for someone, even just for a Halloween display or whatever. It's just a really quirky thing that at a glance, you're not going to even necessarily notice anything's odd about it. But you look closely enough, like, oh, wait, that's weird. Sometimes they'll have people, particularly if you can date them, you'll have people that want to collect them because of the fashion. Like this is a really nice one, even though it's an individual woman, you actually have a nice representation of, okay, what does her bodice look like? How full is her skirt? What is her sleeve doing? What is her hair doing? So, we've got that. They're great for genealogy if you can figure out who these people are. But since the ship's kind of sailed on that one, you've got people that they want the real photographs because these are real people. This is not a fantasy. This is not an illustration. This is not a drawing. It is an actual photograph. So you can say, this is a real situation, which means this is how this woman actually dressed. What does that mean? Was she wealthy? Was she not wealthy? And there's a whole study in all of that. Same thing when you get into kids. Like this is in my opinion, based on the ones that I've come across, I find this one kind of interesting because it's an adult man with a child. There's no woman. So as the mother passed away, there's kind of a general assumption that fathers didn't have much to do with their kids. Well, here's a picture taking that with the kid. All right, is there a story behind that? Again, you don't know the genealogy, so you don't know who this person is, but you can then look at both the way the man is dressed, the chair that they're sitting in, you have the age of it. In some cases, kids, that could be a boy, even though it looks like they were wearing a dress, because kids were many times dressed as girls for a while. So again, it's kind of a nice snapshot to be able to say, all right, we know based on the postmark or the little design in the postmark, we can kind of estimate when this is. How did people dress during that time? And then there's a whole other category when you get into images of two men. So first, I think it's worth sharing this one. That's the same chair. So is that the same guy? I think it is. But then who is the man in the other picture? So it looks like it's the same chair. Is he wearing the same clothes? Is that one guy wearing the same clothes? And I don't think he is. His coat seems to be doing something different. He's got something on his lapel there, and you can see two different things in his lapel. In this one, it looks like there's just one thing on his lapel and it's bigger. So in this particular case, I don't think he's wearing the exact same thing. I think his tie is different. Might be wearing the same boots, but that's probably not out of the question. And his hair looks a little bit different. But, that might have been the local photographer. So that was the backdrop that they had to take those. But then who is the other individual? There is a collecting category for the LGBTQ community of images that could represent same-sex relationships. Now, this could be nothing more than two brothers. So it could be nothing more than that. And because there's no genealogy, who knows? Based on the way they're standing, there doesn't seem to be anything, particularly relationship-wise. But there are collectors who will collect images like that. And it's not particularly common. I do not come across a lot of images like this of two men together. It's a little bit more common to find two women, sisters or whatever, or a lot of bridal parties. But two men, that becomes a category itself. And again, because they're real photos, you're capturing a real time. Like, this is not a fantasy situation. And if you can date it based on its stamps on the back, not postmarks, but like the printing that's on there, you can really help people, figure out whatever they're collecting it for. Real Photo Postcards do have a definite collecting category. So that's about it. That's all I really wanted to cover. I don't have tons of knowledge. Video is actually longer than I'd anticipated it. But I hope you enjoyed it. I hope maybe you picked up a few things. Definitely, it's easy to research some of the back stamps. So definitely, keep that in mind. But if you're trying to do anything, I have gone in and put the U.S. Navy one that I have. This is actually on my website right now. So I do sell some postcards. There is a collecting category for them. Some postcards can get super, super valuable depending on what they show. None of the ones that I have are, I think, particularly valuable. But a Real Photo Postcard might be able to get you $5 to $10, where a traditionally printed postcard might get you $1 or $2. So it is definitely, if you're looking to become a reseller, it's information that's good to have, and definitely how you can identify them and then how you can date them. So hope you enjoyed the video. I hopefully will be doing some additional deep dives. I've got some categories coming up that I want to explore. But for now, I really appreciate your time. Appreciate putting your trust in Trusty Huckster, and I'll talk to you again soon. Bye-bye.
Give me a good deal on something I can use. Make me an offer that I just can't refuse. When that sunrise in the morning and there's nothing there to do, will probably be the last time I see you. Woo-hoo!